Have you ever actually stopped to wonder if the choices you make every single day are, truly your own? We all like to think of ourselves as these deeply rational creatures, carefully weighing the pros and cons of absolutely every decision. But honestly, the reality is way more fascinating. Human beings do not make choices purely through logic. Think about it. Why do we choose one product over another on a crowded supermarket shelf, almost on autopilot? Or, how about this? Why do we instinctively trust some strangers in a job interview while completely dismissing others who might be literally just as qualified? And why do millions of people fiercely admire someone they have never even met? Well, behind every human decision exists an invisible system of psychology. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack the hidden forces shaping our everyday lives. Okay, let's dive into this. 95%. That's a massive number, right? According to groundbreaking research by Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman, 95% of our purchasing decisions occur completely subconsciously. No way, right? But it's true. We aren't really calculating value, we're just reacting to a hidden psychological system. Section 1. The invisible psychological system. To really understand why we do what we do, we have to look at Kahneman's famous dual process model. So imagine your brain has two operating systems. We've got System 1, which is fast, automatic, and highly emotional. Then we have System 2, which is slow, effortful, and logical. Now, System 1 actually evolved thousands of years ago for rapid survival decisions. And believe it or not, it still governs the vast majority of our behaviors today. We spend most of our lives cruising in System 1, basically letting our emotions take the wheel. Section 2, the psychology of buying. Now, how does this play out in the real world? Well, the truth is, people rarely just buy a product. We're buying emotions, identity, a sense of belonging. A luxury watch. It's not really sold to tell time. It represents achievement. A running shoe isn't just footwear. It's about health and discipline. And here's the crazy part. You literally cannot make a rational choice without emotion. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio studied patients with impaired emotional processing due to brain damage. And the fascinating result? Their purely rational decision-making became completely paralyzed. They couldn't even make basic choices. So emotions aren't the enemy of reason. They're absolutely essential mental shortcuts that help us navigate a really complex world quickly. During what consumer psychologists actually call the messy middle of shopping, our System 1 thinking is constantly being hijacked by specific cognitive biases. Take anchoring bias, for example. That's when seeing a high original price makes a markdown seem just irresistible. Then there's loss aversion, which explains why those limited time only offers make us panic and hit buy, simply because we fear losing out on a deal way more than we value actually getting the product. And of course, social proof bias. That's when we just look at what everyone else is doing. If a bunch of people trust a brand, our brain automatically goes, hey, I should probably trust it too. Section 3. Bias in the workplace. Just as we don't buy products purely on logical specs, companies definitely don't hire purely on hard qualifications. They heavily evaluate perceived reliability and attitude. Which brings us to a massively influential concept defined all the way back in 1920 by Edward Thorndike, the halo effect. This is our tendency to form an overall favorable judgment of someone based on just one single positive trait. Think about it. If a candidate has a famous company on their resume, the interviewer's brain automatically fills in the blanks, assuming they're also brilliant and hardworking. A famous 1977 experiment by Nisbet and Wilson proved just how deep this goes. Students evaluated a teacher based on a video clip. When he was framed as warm and approachable, they rated his exact same accent as charming, but when framed as cold, that identical accent was rated as irritating. Literally one single trait colored their entire reality. So the crucial takeaway here is that just being aware of the halo effect, it's not enough to stop it. Our brains just really love the comfort of that mental shortcut. To ensure fair hiring based on true competence, organizations actually have to redesign their environments with what we call structural defenses. We're talking about blinded CV screening where names and universities are hidden. It requires competency by competency scoring and sequential independent assessments. That's a fancy way of saying interviewers need to write down their thoughts before speaking to each other, which stops the group's shared halo bias right in its tracks. Section 4. The search for meaning. So, once our basic needs are met, why do highly successful people often just give away their wealth and time? Well, it comes down to this core concept, self-actualization. Formulated by Kurt Goldstein and popularized by Abraham Maslow, this is basically the intrinsic drive to fully express all of your capacities. You see, giving to charity isn't always about the money itself. It represents a person's identity, their core values, and this deeply ingrained human drive for growth, legacy, and true meaning. You've probably seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs before, right? Starting from basic physiological survival down at the bottom and moving up through safety, belongingness, and esteem. But take a look at the very top of this progression. Later in his career, Maslow actually added something new: self-transcendence. This is the absolute highest, most inclusive level of human consciousness, where people seek a purpose entirely beyond their own individual selves. But what happens when we actually struggle to reach these goals? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is symbolic self-completion theory. When people feel a deficiency in their identity, like let's say they lack real experience in a field they deeply care about, they experience this uncomfortable psychological tension. And a fascinating study by Wicklund showed that to compensate for that, people actively try to assert influence over others. Basically, they project authority as a symbolic substitute for true mastery. Kind of wild, right? Section 5. Why we worship thing. This human desire for status and authority brings us to a really fascinating aspect of modern culture: our absolute obsession with celebrities. It all begins with parasocial relationships. These are one-sided emotional connections with public figures we've literally never met in person. And because these relationships act as a sort of substitute for real interpersonal bonds, they dramatically lower our natural resistance to persuasion. Plus, they massively increase a brand's trustworthiness. And hey, it's not just a fuzzy feeling. This is a measurable physiological response. fMRI scans reveal that seeing expert celebrities actually activates the caudate nucleus. That's a subcortical region of the brain involved in promoting trustful behavior. It also activates the medial temporal lobe, which enhances our memory encoding. So our brains are quite literally hardwired to trust and remember exactly what a famous person tells us. And because of the halo effect we talked about earlier, we automatically assume that if a celebrity is highly successful in acting, they must be highly knowledgeable in other areas too, even medicine. This gives them immense, unearned medical credibility. For example, actor Christina Applegate publicly advocated for MRIs for breast cancer screening, despite advisory groups not recommending them for average-risk individuals. Similarly, Jenny McCarthy famously campaigned against vaccines, claiming a link to autism, a claim completely unsupported by science. Now, regardless of the scientific backing, the psychological mechanism at play here remains exactly the same. Their perceived status drives public health behaviors because our System 1 brains implicitly trust their halo. Section 6. Perception shapes our reality. As we pull back the curtain on this invisible psychological system, we start to see the threads connecting literally every aspect of our society, and we're left with a profound realization. The world is shaped not only by facts, but by perception. The exact same psychological forces, System 1 thinking, cognitive biases, the halo effect, our drive for identity, and our susceptibility to social proof, they dictate what we buy at the store, who we hire in the boardroom, and who we admire on our screens. As the saying goes, to understand human behavior is to understand the invisible forces behind human civilization. So, the next time you make a purchase, judge a colleague, or follow a celebrity's advice, ask yourself, is this my logical brain talking, or is the invisible psychology of my evolutionary past making the choice for me?